And we are live. Welcome to the program. My name is Douglas V. Gibbs. This is the Mr. Constitution Hour. Mr. Constitution Hour for the last 4 or 5 years or so has been on Salem Media, KCBQ, The Answer San Diego, K-Praise, KPRZ in San Diego. But a few Saturdays ago, last episode, and let's kill that. The Answer San Diego. Well, I tell you what, I'm always learning something. Here we go. Got to kill the volume on the screen that I have the show on, so I can, I try to keep all of the chat rooms, everything, so I can see it. And well, I messed up there. Now, let's see here. BitChute is not wanting to participate like usual. It said it wanted to, it was going to, but for whatever reason, it's not streaming. Oh well. BitChute has been a difficulty every time. I may just have to drop BitChute. But YouTube.com, Rumble.com, both of them / Douglas V. Gibbs. That's where the show is. But get back to what I was talking about. So this program has been an AM, FM radio program for 4 or 5 years. And a few Saturdays ago, last episode on AM, FM radio, I moved out of Southern California. I used to live just north of San Diego County. And now that I'm up on the Oregon coast, I lost advertising. I don't teach classes down there anymore, which helped with the funding. So the show is on here. It's online now, and we're starting kind of all over again. It's funny because on the radio I had a pretty good size audience, and I built it over years. I was on AM and FM radio for 15 years, or at least this summer would be my 15th anniversary. I am still on KMET 1490 AM on Saturdays at 1 p.m. Pacific with Alan Myers and Dennis Jackson. But that program also will be coming to an end this year. So after 15 years on AM, FM radio, migrating everything online, and enjoy doing radio. Why kill the show? Keep it going. So we brought it over here. And so welcome to the program. I'm glad you're here. For those of you who like longer programs, this is the place to be. This is an hour long. Right at an hour, I cut it. I am working on some short videos too, for those of you who prefer shorter things that are 5 minutes or less or something like that. I'm working on that as well. Matter of fact, I have one listener. It goes by Ed. Hello, Tackleberry. Good to see you, sir. Ed, who, matter of fact, Ed's in the chat room. Hello, Ed. And I've already scripted out my first video based on an article he did over at Substack. I just haven't had a chance to record it yet. So I'm gonna call it the Ed series, and we're gonna have a few. We're gonna have a few episodes just based on his concerns, and I wanted to go through his concerns, and so those are coming. But the Mr. Constitution Hour, so I was already doing it on Thursday mornings, and it was airing on Saturday nights on those San Diego stations. So why not just bring them over here? Now, before I get started on what I wanted to talk about, something interesting happened to me yesterday, and I wanted to talk about it. So I went in for a couple of MRIs. Now, I was in the United States Navy. I get injured while I was in the Navy. So we got Ryan in there. Well, we are over there at YouTube. So Ryan is over at YouTube. And Ed and Tackleberry are over at Rumble. Glad to see you guys. Glad you're there. And I'm hoping that both channels grow, build momentum. Like I said, when this show was on the radio, I had a pretty good audience. They estimated 7,000 on air, and then whatever it was for the podcast later. So now I'm starting with, a handful of people, but we'll grow it. It takes time. I love doing this kind of thing. But anyway, get back to what I was going to talk about. So yesterday I went in to have a couple of MRIs. I was in the United States Navy. I get injured while I was in the Navy. And so based on my little injuries, because of my injuries, I have, as I've gotten older, I'm on Rumble and YouTube simultaneously. Isn't that something? I figure both of them are great, although one of them might cancel a few of these videos. We'll see. But not that I'm going to name names, but starts with a Y and ends with oob. But anyway, so as I'm getting older, these injuries are now becoming a little pesky. And so my doctors are wanting to take a look at things and, with the MRIs and all sort of stuff. And one of them, they needed to do what's called a contrast. It basically puts a dye in your body, and that way allows them to see a little more clearly what they're trying to look at. And so this particular young man who's administering the MRI and then he does the contrast, and I asked him lots of questions and stuff. And afterwards, I was his only patient for the day. And so afterwards, he and I got talking a little bit, and I had commented because when he went to give me the IV, he says, "Well, which arm?" And I said, "Really, it doesn't matter. Both of them are almost even when it comes to veins." He says, "Really?" I says, "Well, I'm sort of ambidextrous. I'm not ambidextrous on everything, but on a lot of things." And so we got to talking about it later, and he asked me about it, and I said, "Well, I like things I've learned naturally. I do left-handed. I shoot left-handed. I eat left-handed. But things that I was taught, like throwing or writing, I do right-handed." And it was why, and he says, "Why is that?" And I said, "Well, when I was in school in Southern California, in the LA area, the teachers would yank the pencil out of my left hand. That's the wrong hand, and taught me to write right-handed. My penmanship was awful for the longest time. Still is, in my opinion. My wife says I got good penmanship. I don't know about that. But anyway, and then when it came to play baseball, I was confused what hand to throw with. So my dad says, "Well, what hand do you write with?" This one. So he taught me right-handed. And then I threw basically, ladies, don't get mad at me. I threw like a girl. And but defensively, I was sound. It was because I'm left-handed. And so anything that has to do with writing or swinging, like hammering, serving with a tennis racket, as a throwing motion, I do right-handed. Everything else that I learned naturally, I do left-handed. So when I played tennis, I would actually serve right-handed, but volley left-handed. I can kick either footed. I was, baseball, I could bat either handed with baseball bat. I can throw left-handed, but because I'm not practiced doing it, I'm still better right-handed. But anyway, and so he says, and this is the whole point of the story. He says, "Oh, you're like in that generation that my dad was." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And turns out his dad and I are like almost exactly the same age. And we both went to school in LA County. And so Los Angeles County, I guess at the time the hippies were teaching and they were teaching this is the left hand's the wrong hand, right hand's the right hand. And so they did that to more students than just me. Thought that was kind of a kick. I wound up talking to this kid for a while, by the way, and never know, he might be listening to this program. He handed out a card, whatever. But Ed, I throw grenades with my left hand. Depends on how far I need to throw it. If I don't have to go very far, I'll do it left-handed. Because I go far, it's right-handed. But that was a joke. But anyway, so I just thought that was fascinating, and so I wanted to share it. But because one of the things that I aim to do is that all of my shows are a little different, because I'm on the air quite a bit. Fridays and Sundays I'm on over at Patriot Soapbox. So Fridays 2 p.m. through 4 p.m. Pacific, Patriot Soapbox. It's a show that I do with my wife. And then yesterday we had War Hamster join the program for a while. And then on Sunday nights I'm also on Patriot Soapbox with my Alan Myers for a show called For the Republic. Tuesdays I'm on Rumble, but not my Rumble channel, somebody else's Rumble channel. And then I've got Mr. Constitution Hour, that this show on Thursdays and Saturdays. And then I've got Constitution Radio, which is on KMET 1490 AM in Southern California. And that's on Saturdays 1. And so because I'm on so much, I don't want to sit here and repeat the same stuff. So I try to make all of my episodes a little bit different. I try to talk about different things. So if you're like, "Oh, Doug, I like the show, but you have so many," try to catch them all, because I'm not going to talk about the same stuff typically. Every once in a while I might repeat a story, but for the most part, every show is going to be different. And this one, once again, this is radio in my mind, even though we're on Rumble and we're on YouTube and we're where, you can see what I'm doing and all this other stuff. I'm a radio guy. I've been like I said, I've been a radio host, talk radio for 15 years. And I was actually doing online radio, podcasting, but we didn't call it podcasting back then. Like Blog Talk Radio. I did that for 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, about 4 or 5 years before I got into AM and FM radio. And so if that's what it feels like as I'm talking, that's because that's what I do. Now that said, and I am one, and folks in the Rumble chat room probably know this. So we've got one person in the Ryan in the YouTube chat room, and you're welcome to come over to Rumble. You can stay over there at YouTube. If you come over to Rumble, you get to hang out with the guys that are in the Rumble chat room. Up to you on how you want to do that. I try to pay attention, and the nice thing about the program I'm using is both chat rooms show up on my main chat in front of me. Then I can also look over to the left. I've got another computer over here where I look at stuff. But anyway, I try to pay attention to the chat room. So for those of you who've been following me a long time, you know this. So if you've got a question, you got a comment, you just want to be funny, whatever. And Ed says hello to Mrs. Constitution. She's in the other room reading right now for whatever reason. She didn't want to be next to the show this time. I try to pay attention to the chat room as much as possible. So if you got something to say, you've got a question, you've got a comment, you have a topic you want me to go over, I am more than happy to try to pay attention. Also, if you like, after the show, you're like, oh man, I wish you would do a video or talk about this topic, at douglasvgibbs.com, my website, douglasvgibbs.com. In the link bar, there's something that says Ask Doug. Click that, fill out the form. I'll take a look, probably talk about what you want to talk about. Now, Tackleberry says, I'm ready for damn near everything, but can shoot lefty if needed. See, now that's the interesting story, Tackleberry. So I know you were Army, right? And well, I was Navy. And one thing about Navy is we don't use firearms a whole lot. If you're, or at least your regular rates, there are rates that use their firearms a lot. But SEALs, like Special Forces, and there's a couple of rates that would. Typically a sailor's not going to be walking around shooting that much. So Tackleberry says yes, Army. But I grew up around guns, sort of. My dad was in the Marine Corps. He had guns as a child. He taught me to shoot when I was like 6, but we didn't get to go out very often. It may have been maybe 3 or 4 times they took me out shooting. But because of the riding right-handed, throwing right-handed thing, he taught me to shoot right-handed. Just makes sense. I must be a right-hander. They never considered that it was possible I was actually a left-hander when I was a kid. So I get into boot camp in the Navy. And while Navy sailors don't do a whole lot of shooting after boot camp, unless you're particular rate or your Special Forces, you still get some shooting training. You still get training, and you can still get a marksman, ribbon, something like that. But once again, you're not going to do a whole lot of shooting once you're out of boot camp. So I've got my piece, and in the Navy, that's what they don't call it a weapon. They don't call it a fire. They call it a piece. And so, and for the ladies, cover your ears for a second. So in the boot camp, we call the gun rack the whorehouse, because you always go to the whorehouse to get a piece. But anyway, so we got our rifles, our piece, and I'm out there shooting, and the CC comes up behind me, and he's like, kind of getting into it with me, because I couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. Then he watched me. He says, well, you're shooting the wrong hand. You're left eye dominant. I didn't even know what that meant. Dad had taught me to shoot. I shot right-handed. I went out shooting with Dad 4 or 5 times, 3 or 4 times, whatever. That's all I knew. He switches me over to the left-handed, shows me what to do. I'm hitting the target every time. I'm almost bullseyeing. I was shooting with the wrong-handed all along. Good thing they caught it in boot camp. So that's what's funny, Tackleberry, for your comment about being a righty for about everything, but you can shoot lefty if needed. I can't hit the broadside of a barn right-handed shooting, but if I shoot left-handed, I'm a pretty good shot. I can't eat right-handed. I'll dump the food in front of me, but left-handed, that's But once again, people see me write with my right hand and say, well, I thought you were left-handed. I am, except for when I write and when I throw. And then with a hammer, I can use either hand, but I'm better right-handed because that's what I learned. That's what I was in construction for 20 years. So the great thing about being kind of ambidextrous in construction is when I got tired of hammering with my right hand, I just flipped it over the left hand. I kept on hammering. So, but anyway, all right. So let's see. Anything else in the chat room before I move on to what I want to talk about? Mainly pistol, long gun feels weird to me. Long gun, pistol, both. I'm left-handed. Tackleberry. Ed, if I speak out of the left and right side of my mouth, does that make me ambidextrous or just a politician? Yeah, exactly. I don't even know. Either a politician or a lawyer. Just cracking jokes. I know you are, Ed. So anyway, all right. Now that I've got that all out of the way, did a little talking. Then don't worry, I'm watching the chat room. Go for it. Put something if you want. I'm more than happy to answer it. But so one of the things I want to talk about, and I didn't talk about this much yesterday. I haven't written an article about it yet, but Memorial Day. And Memorial Day is funny because people, I don't think people understand sometimes. This is the reason I'm wearing this cap, by the way. Because we had a Memorial Day parade in town today, a Memorial Weekend parade. And I live in a small town, and it was a lot of fun. And it was mostly, floats being pulled on a trailer, and the floats were, you could tell the kids did the work or whatever. It was a good time. A few marching bands, a couple of elementary school marching bands, a couple of middle school marching bands, one of each local. And then three high school marching bands, two from out of the area, then our local band. And it was a good time. And so I decided to wear this hat. I rarely wear this hat. This is my Navy hat, but what it does, it has, if you're watching, I've got other things on here. So this is my rank insignia, my collar device, Petty Officer 3rd Class. This pin right here between the rank insignia and this lower thing is USS Chandler DDG 996. That was the first ship I was on, guided missile destroyer. Loved being on that ship. This lower one is USS Peoria LST 1183. Flat bottom, carries the Marines, drops them off. It can beach. It has the, can launch AAVs. It can beach, and tanks roll off of it, the whole bit. That was a lot of fun. And then over here on the bottom, this is just a veteran thing. This is a veteran kind of ribbon. It's not a real ribbon. And then I've got my deployment ribbon and 2 battlees. Battlees are basically a battle efficiency kind of competition that ships in the squadrons go through. And both ships I was on, when I was on them, won. And so I got my battlee. So so I like to wear this hat sometimes on things like Veterans Day, Memorial Day, because I am proud that I served. I am not a combat veteran. And my dad was a combat veteran. I've got a lot of friends that were. I was not a combat veteran. I'm what they call a Cold War veteran. Understand the Cold War wasn't always cold. We did have some situations where I had my adrenaline flowing, but nothing like a combat veteran. So I will never claim to be such. But I am proud that I served. And if a combat situation had arisen, I'd have been there. I'd been, no problem. I'm proud of the fact that I had the chance to serve. But here's the thing. And while I did wear this on Memorial Day, and people thanked me for my service, that's not what Memorial Day really is. And Americans, maybe they just mean well. I don't know, but Memorial Day is about remembering the fallen. When I lived in Southern California, I used to visit my grandfather's grave at Riverside National Cemetery on Memorial Day. He served in World War II, and he was Army Air Corps, and he was in France, and important individual in my life. I've got a couple friends also, Vietnam vets that are buried there, and I used to go every Memorial Day. I was at Riverside National. Now that I've moved, I don't get to go. I don't get to visit my grandfather or my 2 friends that are buried there. But my memories of them, live on in my mind. But Memorial Day has always been important to me. But we have to remember that Memorial Day is about our fallen. It's about honoring those heroes who died while in service to our country. Memorial Day is about those citizen soldiers who comprised 3% of the colonists, who were willing to stand against the greatest military power of the day to fight for the independence of a new union of states. Memorial Day is about those fighting men of the American Revolution that often wore no shoes and weren't exactly sure what they had gotten themselves into. And they fought a well-armed professional military with limited supplies, basic weaponry, not a whole lot of training. They pledged, despite the odds against them, their lives, their fortunes, their sacred honor, which is what is on at the end of the Declaration of Independence, for an idea of liberty, an idea of this grand experiment based on the principles of liberty and self-governance and the laws of nature and of nature's God. We'll call them natural law, natural rights, your rights. Memorial Day is about a young Marine who, to protect our trade routes and seagoing vessels, stormed the shores of Tripoli during the Barbary Wars. Memorial Day is about the Second Revolution, where during the War of 1812, the young military, once again, faced off with the most powerful military in the world against all odds, outgunned. Yet those brave soldiers were willing to give up their lives, if necessary, for an idea, liberty. Memorial Day is about those brave soldiers who fought to support Americans during the westward expansion against fierce opposing forces, incredible numbers. Those Americans who died in the Mexican-American War, a war of liberation for territories under the iron fist of a bloody Mexican dictator. Memorial Day is about the brothers who fought against their own brothers in a war between the states that defined America's resolve to truly reveal the meaning of the phrase, all men are created equal. Memorial Day is about the Rough Riders who stormed San Juan Hill and the brave Americans who did all that was necessary to protect America's interest in the war with Spain, merely 30 years after the severe weakening of America's forces from the war between the states. Memorial Day is about the brave warriors in a world war that America didn't have to enter, World War I, but did so to protect Europe against the war machines of Germany and Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire. Memorial Day is about the greatest generation as they gave their lives in yet another defense of freedom in Europe, this time also in the Pacific, as they fought against the tyranny of the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, Japan. Memorial Day is about the Americans who served to stop the spread of communism in Korea and Vietnam. Whether they were right wars, wrong wars, they put their lives on the line, even when the politicians were unwilling to fight to win. Welcome home. Welcome home, Vietnam vets. For those of you out there, welcome home. Memorial Day is about those Americans who gave their lives during the Cold War, a war that was often not the war without conflict that was advertised, and a war that became victorious when the Berlin Wall came crashing down because of our resolve to remain strong in the face of the enemy. Memorial Day is about those Americans who served in the Persian Gulf at a time before we fully understood what we were up against, about those Americans who extended or entered service after September 11, 2001, for the purpose of defending ourselves against an enemy we still understood very little at the time, and about the gunfire in the Middle Eastern villages and the explosions on the roadway. Memorial Day is about the heroes who, knowing the dangers and the risks and believing deeply in the cause of liberty, gave their lives for the freedom of people they didn't even know and have never met. Memorial Day is about the lives lost during the Afghanistan withdrawal and the lives lost in operations since, including Operation Epic Fury, who stood tall in duty and, no matter the cause, were willing to put their lives on the line for an idea known as liberty. Memorial Day is about our fallen. It is a day for prayers and reflection. It is about thanking those we can no longer thank in person. It is about visiting the cemeteries where they lie, dropping off flowers, American flags at their graves, kneeling in prayer, dropping tears in their nameplates as we remember their sacrifice, or just looking to heaven to thank them. Whatever, however it is you do it, that's what it's about. My grandfather, World War II veteran Thurman Douglas Clark, and my dear friends, Vietnam Army veteran Paul Young, Vietnam Navy veteran Bill Prouty, rest at Riverside National Cemetery in Southern California, surrounded by heroes. Surrounded by our blessed fallen who gave their lives so that we may live in liberty. Memorial Day is about an idea called liberty. May her fire continue to burn bright as we remember those who gave their lives to protect that idea. Memorial Day is a solemn time. It's, I remember, and I take it seriously. I remember when I was in Hawaii and I visited the USS Arizona, and and it's got that white deal over it. It's still underwater, and it was solemn ground to me, sacred ground, and I walked into that and I took off my hat and I quietly just walked to the edge and I looked down and looked at the plaques. And while I didn't say anything, it just drove me nuts. People that were laughing loudly and treating it like just any other tourist visit, kids running around. It was, disrespectful, to me. Sacred ground. Now, I didn't say anything because it wasn't my place to dictate to someone how they're to act. Or how they should take care of their kids. But at the same token, it bothered me. And when a couple of them looked at me, I had my hat up against my chest, against my heart. Just kind of did one of these, kind of looks, like, maybe you should be a little more solemn. Maybe you should be a little more respectful and in an environment like this. Now, the little town I'm in, so they had the parade, and then after the parade, they had a big flea market and stuff like that. And something funny about this area I live in. Now, I don't live anywhere near Portland, Oregon. I am in Oregon, but I'm in the southwest corner of the state, right on the coast. And my joke is I'm as far as I can get from Portland and San Francisco and still be in the Pacific Northwest. I'm kind of 8.5 hours to each of them from where I'm at. And it's funny here because, and I don't mean to judge people just by looking, don't judge a book by a cover, right? But we do, right? And in California, I could usually tell who the constitutional-minded Christian conservative people were, because in California, the ones that aren't have no problem going as far as they can to look as freaky as they can. And most of the people who agree with me usually have a. Now, that said, there's always exceptions. I mean, I had this friend of mine, man, and he had dreadlocks and he had, a bunch of earrings long as ears, and a ring in his nose and there was just a couple other things about it. And he was conservative as they got, as constitutionally minded as they got. A woman, friend of mine, and I don't want to say her name because everybody will know who I'm talking about, because she has a unique first name. Man, she's got kind of the shaved head on the side a little bit and different colors of hair and got the tattoos going and lots of jewelry on her face. And she's one of the greatest constitutional conservative warriors ever met in my life. So I don't mean to judge books by covers or say that if you're a certain ideology or you have a certain belief system, you have to look a certain way. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is, in Southern California, in my circles, usually what you see is you could usually tell. I get here, it's a little different. Some of these people that look like they probably are fresh off the streets of Portland or San Francisco, I met today while we're visiting the different things going on for the Memorial Day weekend deal. And I'm not shy about talking to people. I'm not shy about what I believe. And usually if I get into conversations with people, I tell them, I'm a constitutionalist, Constitution first. I really don't care about party as much as I do the Constitution and my faith. I'm a Christian. But, if the conversation goes further, they'll learn that I'm probably, what would be considered conservative. And I'm a registered Republican, not because I love the Republican Party, but because my whole life, that was the party that was closer to what I believe. And even then, I usually want to slap around the Republicans sometimes, but I just never believed that being an independent or non-party affiliation was the way to go. And that's just me. I always felt that there's two vessels there, and, you really need to be a part of one of them. And both vessels are not exactly the way they should be. but at least one of them is close. And everybody says, well, I don't want to be a Republican. There's too many problems. Well, then the best thing to do is be a part of that party and change it in the right direction. And, with the MAGA thing going and Trump and all that, I'm kind of jazzed because, the party is, in my opinion, going in the right direction. And so I get to talking to some of these people, and I'm thinking in my mind as I'm talking to some of these people today, this has got to be a libtard and a half. They just got that look. And then we get into the subject matter, and they're like, oh, by the way, thank you for your service. And, God bless America. And then we start talking a little deeper, and they agree with me more than I suspected they would. Same thing with the kid that did my MRI. Same thing. We get to talk, and he says, hey, man, by the end of the conversation, he says, I probably agree with you more than you realize. I wound up, giving him my card, and, he should check out. Now, and Ed says in the chat room, there's nothing wrong with judging folks. Judging has become a euphemism with a negative connotation, a pejorative for pattern recognition. Well, and I tell people that I'm not judging, I'm observing, and I'm recognizing. To judge is, and even then, we take that biblical idea out of context. Do not judge lest thee be judged, and I think it meant more along a godly principle, of God judging rather than us having an observation. People, you're absolutely right, Ed, in the chat room. We've taken that and twisted it and bent it and made it mean things that it doesn't mean. But nonetheless, I am surprised often. I sometimes understand it. Well, I kind of judge that person, if we want to use that word. I observed that person, thought that person was this, and they fooled me. It was this. And the moment they start talking, that's the reason why I've always been the kind of person that I try to get to know the individual, because you just never know. I don't care what you look like. I don't care if you're polka dot with maroon hair and 16 toes. I mean, if you're an American, you believe in this system, you believe in liberty, you believe in that our rights come from God, not government, man, we're going to get along real well. I'm reminded of the parable of the Good Samaritan. Ed, you might be onto something there. So once again, I do watch the chat room, folks, or at least I try to. And maybe I'm rambling a little bit, but it just amazed me when I was out and about today. I just thought that was interesting. Tomorrow we got some more stuff. There's a car show going on, all kinds of stuff locally. I didn't even know they had all these festivities. Yesterday, where my wife and I are doing some errands. So I said, oh, you gonna be at the parade tomorrow? I don't know. And after about 5 or 6 times of being asked if I was gonna be at the parade, go check out the parade, had to ask what time. I didn't even know. It's a big deal out here. But anyway, so get back to the show, what I wanted to talk about. And actually what I wanted to talk about, this is kind of interesting. So I'm surprised, but yet I'm not. So I'm sure you heard that the Democrat Party came out with this report. They call it the Post-Mortem. What is it? The Post-Mortem report of the 2024 election. It took them almost 2 years to come out with this report. It's almost 200 pages. And what it is this report of, okay, where did we foul up? How can we fix the problem? That kind of stuff, right? And when you read the report and you listen to the Democrat Party and their opinion about this, it's a masterclass in self-deception. They have and what it's funny because getting back to judging and all this other stuff, what we think about the hard left Democrats. I'm not talking about the average person that doesn't really understand how bad their party really is. I'm talking about the real socialist believers, right? I'm talking about the Pelosi's and the Elizabeth Warrens and the AOCs, these people, right? And they do exactly what I expect. I swear they are so predictable and so pathetic. And so I'm going through this report and I'm listening to people talk about it, and it's designed to analyze their historic electoral defeat and figure out what went wrong. And when you read it, it's not what's in. First of all, the first thing that strikes you is not what's in there, but what's not in there. And by the way, I wrote an article about this. I am going to talk a little bit deeper than what the article says, but definitely check it out. DNC Post-Mortem Denial. Thanks, Ed, for putting the chat, for putting the link to my blog in the Rumble chat. But it, in an attempt to analyze this defeat, like I said, what's interesting is not what's in it, what's not in it. What's not in it is the man who led the party into the abyss. Joe Biden's not mentioned. He's not even talked about. His confusion about where he was, running into walls, and his inability to function as a human being, much less president of the United States, it's not even in there. And then when you read the report, the other thing that you start realizing is they believe they barely lost the election. Trump was the first Republican in forever to win the popular vote and the Electoral College. He won all the swing states. They didn't barely lose. And I don't know if they've been saying that because they want everybody else to believe it or they believe it. And it's funny because when you look at this, and you look at how badly they lost, it was a repudiation of Democratic policies, leadership, vision. I mean, President Trump one-handedly, and it wasn't some fluke because he did it twice. The one time he didn't, which I think actually did it 3 times, the one time he didn't was 2020, and I think he did. We'll just put it that way, so that certain channels don't decide to knock us off the air. They can't. I've been saying for years they cannot debate in the arena of ideas. They don't know how to. And then what their ideas are so unpopular, but yet they get to the point where they believe their own BS. They believe their own deception. They don't understand that Americans have rejected their woke DEI socialist progressive agenda. And that's like their signature offering now. And understand, this is a party that went from JFK to where it is now. Not that I'm saying JFK was some conservative, godly, whatever. I mean, he agreed with the New Deal a lot, and the reason why he was cutting taxes because he understood that cutting taxes would increase revenue, and then he want to take that money and throw it into New Deal type things. So let's not put him on too high of a pedestal, but compared to what we got today, the guy loved the country, he hated communism, and he could think deeper than the tip of his nose. Now they've gone from like JFK to Carter to Bill Clinton to Hillary Clinton to Bernie Sanders to AOC. And it's a decline that we can easily see. We see it. It's obvious. It's in front of us. And we're like, whoa, what happened there? It's like they remind me of the woman. And you've seen these actors and actresses, right? And they have some work done. And they're just proud of their work. And you're like, whoa, dude. And their faces all, and the lips are about 14 times too big. And and I've seen people in public, and the woman, and she's all dressed all, whatever, like she's, hot, whatever. And she's got her huge job done. And her face looks like it's been, pulled back tighter than Pelosi's. And you're like, they can't see that they look like a cartoon character. They're blind to it. This is what the Democrats are right now with their woke, DEI, social. They can't see themselves. They can't even recognize. They're not willing to. They're blind to the reality that they've become a caricature, a cartoon character, like the woman or guy with too much work done. And the irony is thicker than mud and clear as crystal. We have a party, and this is the part that really cracks me up too. And it's throughout the report. We got to save our democracy. It's all about our democracy. We got to do this for our democracy. We got to save the democracy. And they're talking about saving our quote unquote democracy, which, first of all, we're not supposed to be. I'll get to that. But then at the same time, they subvert democracy What they've argued, they claim that they argue for the most fundamental processes of democracy, but yet they subvert it. They bypass their own primary system. They shoved a sitting president aside without voter approval and replaced him with a vice president whose incoherence and lack of qualifications were apparent to anyone not invested in the delusion. If this is what saving democracy looks like, how can a party that can't even explain what a constitutional republic is even see through their own BS, bullpucky? Doug, answer when you can, or if you like, can I post this? Oh yeah. So what do you mean? When it comes to your Substack, get a hold of me later on text. Explain to me what you mean, and we'll talk about it. But get back to the point here. And once again, I try to pay attention to the chat. See, try to pay attention to the chat. But anyway, so I'm watching all this, and I'm thinking the reports left out glaring omission Joe Biden's role in this electoral catastrophe. It tells you everything you need to know about the Democratic Party's capacity for honest self-assessment. This is what I said earlier, right? Being able to look in the mirror and self-analyze, to self-assess. It's like analyzing the sinking of the Titanic without mentioning the iceberg. Biden's approval ratings were underwater for years. His cognitive decline was apparent to all, but the most willfully blind. Nothing to see here except for what we want to see, right? And his policies, and when I say his policies, the Democratic Party policies. He was going along to get along, maybe he was one of the leaders of these ideas, but the policies created an economic melee that affected working families across this country. And here comes Trump. Hey, man, I'm for the working people. I'm going to take care of this. Yet somehow the DNC's analysis manages to sidestep all of those inconvenient truths. And as The Hill reported, the backlash against DNC Chair Ken Martin is growing. They're mad at the messenger. Well, if they don't turn things, they're mad at the messenger who's not giving a message. Look in the mirror, folks. The whole party leadership is totally deaf to any of the warnings that are out there. And the tragedy here isn't that just that the Democrats lost an election. Understand, despite their claim to the contrary, they lost it big. The tragedy, though, is that they've learned nothing from the loss. They've convinced themselves that their ideas aren't the problem. There's nothing wrong, and they have the midterms right where they want them. I almost feel like I'm trying to remember what movie it was. Or somebody was getting his rear end kicked, and his arms twisted behind him. He said, "I got you right where I want you." And he's on the butt end of everything. The only issue that's killing them right now, they think, is how they're framing their message. Their message is fine. We're just not messaging it right. We're not framing it right. We're not getting people to understand how wonderful socialism is. They believe that they could just shout their progressive nonsense a little louder. Americans would suddenly embrace open borders, inflationary spending, gender ideology for kindergartners, the rest of their radical agenda. I could have saved them 2 years and 200 pages. I could have wrote their report for them without spending 2 years doing it. And if they just listen to me, they could turn their stuff around. Get rid of woke, get rid of DEI, get rid of the socialism. And then you've got to get rid of your inability or unwillingness to debate coherently on substantive issues. They have this recipe for electoral disaster, and they played it out in 2024 because of woke, DEI, socialism, and word salads. Americans don't want their daughters competing against biological males in sports. They don't want their children being taught that they're oppressors or victims based on their skin color, or that they can, without their parents' permission, get pregnant and have an abortion, or have their wee-wee cut off and become a girl. They don't want their hard-earned money going to fund the endless parade of progressive social experiments. And what's particularly revealing is how Democrats are responding to the report. Once again, their complaint isn't that they failed or that it fails to provide honest answers about why they lost, but that whoever should have provided the information was asleep at the switch. Somehow the messenger is the problem. They're not angry about the content. They're angry about the timing and the optics as well. Oh, it just came out right for the midterm. This doesn't look good for us. The Titanic's going down, and they're busy rearranging the deck chairs while they fail to mention there's an iceberg out there. All of it is a pointless jog around the truth while wearing a blindfold. It's an activity that avoids addressing the real problem. Now, the path forward for the Democrats should be obvious. Not that I'm trying to help them out. Not that I'm trying to help out the Democrats, but I doubt they're even watching my show. And if they are, they probably think I'm full of hooey anyway. But if they are willing to listen to me, the path forward is easy. Abandon the radical progressive agenda that has alienated half the country and return to something resembling mainstream American values. And I can shout that from the mountaintops, but they won't do it. What they're going to do, I guarantee it, because this is what they do, especially now. They will double down on what beat them, convinced that their ideas are too sophisticated for ordinary Americans to appreciate. They will continue to treat Trump not as a political opponent to be debated, but as some existential evil whose defeat justifies any means, including subversion of their own democratic processes. So now the 2026 midterms are on the horizon. We're what, about 6 months away now. 5 months away, roughly. And see, 6, 11, yeah, all right, 7 months. But Democrats face a fundamental choice here. They can continue their journey into political irrelevance. Or no, I said that backwards, 5 months. Yeah. But anyway, they can continue their journey into political irrelevance. Math is not my, apparently not my strength there. Or they can have a genuine reckoning with any Americans rejected, why Americans have rejected their vision for this country. Their post-mortem report should be an indication to them that they are heading into political relevance, and they better do something about it. And it means abandoning what's pulling them underwater. And that's not just, and understand, I don't want the Democratic Party necessarily. I mean, I want it to. So I disagree with them. I think they're idiots. I think the ideology is dangerous. But we need a second party, just not a crazy one like what they're doing. Because, see, debate creates liberty. Liberty requires debate. The founding fathers didn't all go into the Constitutional Convention all in full agreement, holding hands and dancing in the daisies. They debated it, man. There was disagreements. It was back and forth. And then they figured out the answer out of that debate. And one side didn't necessarily get everything they wanted. The other side didn't get necessarily everything they wanted. They compromised on some stuff. They gave in on certain things. Some of them, gave in because they realized they were wrong. But that's what creates liberty. We want debate. We want them going at it. Freedom requires many voices, coherent voices, not word salads. The American people deserve better than a choice between one party that's trying to solve problems and another that's trying to convince us those problems don't exist. And until the Democrats figure that out, they're going to keep wondering why they keep losing elections, unless they cheat at them. And in their minds, they think they should have won because they're like the ultimate narcissist. The whole party, it's like the ultimate narcissist. If ever you've met anybody who's super narcissistic, they're the ones that are got the puffed out chest. They think they're tough. They think everything revolves around their world, right? And they're always right, even when they're wrong. You've come across these people, right? They don't take responsibility for their action. They won't listen to anybody. These are the people that you have to be careful, because if you give them money, you might enable them, right? This is what the Democrats are suffering from. And it's the same thing that the Federalist Party was suffering from right before it faded into obscurity, never to win another election. And I think that's where we're headed here. Perhaps. And, and once again, it's like American Constitutional Purist Party. Ed, you might have something there. Of course, I always wanted to create something called the Founders Party. American Constitutional Purist Party, Founders Party. We call it the Originalist Party. Yeah. Well, and because here's the thing. People say, well, the right and the left. There's no such thing as a right. The right doesn't exist. What is the left and what is the right? So let's do that real quick. Political spectrum, far left and far right is what? Now, if we look at the way the Democrats look at it, which they place their left-right dynamic, the diagram, whatever you want to call it, the political spectrum, they base it on the French model. In France, right before the French Revolution, you had those that agreed with the king, wanted no change, agreed with the state church, which were religious and, the theocratic kind of folks. They were on the far right. They sat on the right side of the assembly. On the left were the ones that wanted change. They were secularistic. They were collectivistic. They wanted to get rid of the king. They wanted to get rid of the state church. That was the left. And then the moderates sat in the center. So Democrats kind of adopted that. So if you're religious, you're on the right. If you're nationalistic in the sense, the way they mean nationalistic, that you believe in the country, patriotic, you must be on the right. And if you're on the right, that means you want a king. But on the left, then you want change, you're secular, and you're progressive, you want to progress, and blah, 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 blah. We never had a state religion. We never had a nobility, although sometimes it feels like it. So the political spectrum in America developed a little differently. It's very simple. Far right is anarchy, zero government. Far left is 100% government. Pure dictatorship. Left, big government. Right, small government. The Constitution is dead center. It creates a big government, but limits the hell out of it. Dead center. Okay? So that would mean that anything, any party, any group that believes that our government should have less power than what the Constitution calls for is on the right. Aside from maybe a handful of certain libertarians, nobody to the right. Even the Republican Party, with their limited government ideas, think the government should have more power than what the government calls for, or what the Constitution calls for, should I say. Donald Trump, as much as I like him, is no conservative and is no right-winger. He's probably the closest to the Constitution we've had in a president since John Tyler before the war between the states. But he's still to the left of the Constitution and quite a bit. Not as far to the left as the Democrats, and definitely not as far left to communism, which is about as far left as you can go. But he's to the left. The Republican Party is to the left of the Constitution. There is no right. There is no right wing. You're either constitutional or you're some degree to the left of it. And the closer you are to the Constitution, the less left you are, the more I'll probably get along with you. I tell you, someone who kind of fascinated me too. I love to see these situations where someone gets it suddenly. James Madison, for example, when he went into the Constitutional Convention, he was kind of a big government-minded guy. He thought that the new national legislature, which would eventually become the federal government and the Congress, should be able to pass laws to negate state laws if they didn't like them. That's a pretty big government idea. By the end of the convention, James Madison had swung all the way to the other side. Totally limited government, totally believing in Jeffersonian ideas rather than Hamiltonian ideas. Do I have a graph of the political spectrum in one of my books? Yes. It's in my A Promise of American Liberty. I believe it might also be maybe in Repeal Democracy, but it's definitely in A Promise of American Liberty. Ed is asking me that in the chat room. My book, A Promise of American Liberty, definitely has that chart in it. It might be in the history book, maybe, but I'm not sure about that. But it's definitely in my A Promise of American Liberty. I've got that graph, and it's I could probably put up a picture right now if I had been thinking about it. I'll see if, matter of fact, you know what? Let's do that. Let's see if I can find it real quick. So let me pull up pictures here. Picture political spectrum. Whoops. Spectrum. Okay. Let's see if this is what I'm looking for. All right, I got it. I'm going to do a screen share right now just for you, Ed, so that you can see it. Everybody else, you can take a look too. So let's see here. Let me make sure I've got what I need here. Let's see, share screen. Window. Boom, boom. So I hope you can see this. The political spectrum. So if you look at it, you see kind of a triangle. On the far right is 0% government, anarchy. So there you got anarchy right there. Middle is constitution. Democracy is actually to the right. Libertarianism is probably right here in between, because democracy gives all the power to the vote of the people. So it's actually less government, but democracy always winds up just like anarchy always winds up over here as an oligarchy, always. So 100% government, or a few rule over the many. You got monarchy, dictatorship, theocracy, fascism, communism. Yes, fascism is to the left, not to the right. Big government, socialism, aristocracy, plutocracy, tribalism, ethnocracy. Democrats are more to the left than GOP's actually. I made this chart before Trump came along, by the way. So I'd say the GOP might be right around here under Trump. Not as far left, but it still is. But anyway, so there you go. Let me do that better. There you go. So hopefully that gives you a visual idea of what I'm talking about. So anyway, all right, let's stop sharing and get rid of that. So hopefully that helps. I'm flipping through your books and mainly see the Tytler cycle. The Tytler cycle is something I ought to talk about on this program. Thank you, Ed, for reminding me. Maybe next episode, I'll get into the Tytler cycle. Tytler cycle is very important as well. All right, with a couple minutes left to go, I wanted to real quick talk about Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard, the reason why I brought up Madison changing, Tulsi did the same thing. Tulsi Gabbard was a Democrat. She ran against, Trump. Sort of. She was one of the candidates for the 2020 election and didn't get it. She, or 2016, she argued with Hillary and all that, and Biden and Kamala and so on and so forth. But anyway, so she's one of the most fearless members of Trump's national security team. Absolutely love Tulsi Gabbard. She went through her red pill moment, I guess you could call it, and blew me out of the water. Well, she's just put in on X, she indicated that she has submitted her resignation letter effective June 30th. Her husband has a rare bone cancer. A friend of mine has something called multiple myeloma. I wonder if that's what her husband has. Multiple myeloma kind of begins in the plasma cells, the bone marrow, and then creates lesions, literal holes in the bones that weaken the skeletal structure and then leads to sudden fractures, including vertebral compression fractures, which is what happened to my friend. There's other rare bone cancers like the Ewing sarcoma and things like that. That might be what her husband has. So she's going to step down effective June 30th. And this creates an interesting situation. First, she now is going to feel rushed to get as much done as she wants in what little time she has. Then the question is, who does it go to after she's gone? After her resignation is in place, who's the next person standing? Next person up, next guy up. And understand that that her resignation is coming at a time when the Senate is going to do whatever it can to stall or block any confirmation for her replacement. We'll see what happens. Now, that said, the replacement, if no nomination is submitted, an acting director can serve 210 days. So it'll be after, like January 26th. But so she's going to continue to oversee intelligence operations the next 5 weeks. The transition is probably going to start in the next week or so. Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence, the acting director will probably be, what's his name? Something Lucas. So it's on the tip of my tongue, his name off the top of my head. But anyway, it's probably going to, matter of fact, Trump has already indicated that Lucas, Lukas, I can't remember the first name off the top of my head. He's going to be her replacement, at least as an acting, director. And once again, he can hold that until January 26th. So that makes the Aaron Lucas, that's his name, Aaron, Aaron Lucas. And that makes the midterms critical. If we want the right person like Lucas in there, then we need to win the midterm so that on both houses, so that they can get the person they want through the confirmation hearing. Otherwise, you're going to get who the deep state wants. All right. I wanted to get to, and I didn't, but you can look it up. There were some shots fired at the White House tonight. I don't know much details. It's a developing story. Law enforcement is responding to reports of gunfire near the north lawn of the White House. And I wanted to talk a little bit about it. I don't have a whole lot of information anyway. I'm out of time like 2 minutes ago. So if you want to check that out, and maybe tomorrow night on For the Republic on Patriot Soapbox, I'll talk about it. If not, I'll definitely talk about it. If it is something, if it is an actual sniper or attempted assassin or something like that, I'll talk about it on Thursday's Mr. Constitution Hour. As always, it's always been a pleasure. Absolutely appreciate you guys. Thank you, Ed, in the chat room there at Rumble. So for you guys watched on YouTube and going, oh man, I wish I was in Rumble. I could have got Colin Wood, which is Ed, put 3 links in the Rumble chat of books that he appreciates that I wrote. And so just because I'm curious which ones they are, let's bring them up real quick. I'm pretty sure what they are, but I don't want to say it without knowing for sure. So God in the Constitution, A Promise of True Self-Evident. That's my first part 1 history book. I've got the other 3 written. I just haven't gotten them formatted and published yet. That one is from the Saxons to the election of Jefferson. And Repeal Democracy. That's one of my babies. Repeal Democracy. We're told all the time that we are a democracy. We are a republic, and I explain in that book the difference between democracy and a republic. And yes, I know you're still waiting on part 2 in Collinwood. See all these books behind me? Most of those are my resources for the part 2. It's written for the most part. I still got to finish the bibliography. I still got to do some of the formatting. I got to do some tweaking. And I'm writing other books at the same time. And to be honest with you, it isn't taking priority. I do have a book that's getting ready to come out, about a 200-page book called The Constitutional Presidency of Donald J. Trump. Everybody keeps saying how unconstitutional he is. So I'm taking all of those arguments of how unconstitutional, and I'm debating them in the book. And that should come out hopefully in the next few weeks. So that all said, thanks for spending the time with me. It's been a pleasure. Sorry, I don't have the collar shirt. Usually I have a collar shirt with a button-down shirt, but I've got, this is a Williamsburg shirt, actually. And I got my special Navy hat. We'll see you. So for this show, Thursdays 10 a.m. Pacific, Saturdays 8 p.m. Pacific. This particular Constitution Hour, same format, 2 days a week. And it's been a pleasure being here with you guys. And thank you for spending the time with me. And God bless all of you. United we stand, combined we kick butt. God bless America, my friends. God bless you. Visit me at douglasvgibbs.com right there. See it right there. douglasvgibbs.com. I write there. And now if you want to be on my email list, I finally got it fixed on that site. So if you go to douglasvgibbs.com, you scroll down and you find, get emails, enter your stuff there. You'll be on my list. I send out emails right before all of these shows, about my articles, all of that. So if you want to be on that email list, go to douglasvgibbs.com main page, fill out the email list thing. If you got questions for me, you want to get a hold of me on that same website, douglasvgibbs.com, hit the Ask Doug link. And of course, if you want to donate and help fund this thing on the main page at douglasvgibbs.com, scroll all the way down, hit donate. You guys are awesome. I appreciate you. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye now.